Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Let's make a start. Do the introduction. Tonight we have Dr. Christopher Morris and visiting his wife as well, Sue. Christopher and his twin brother were born in Aberdeen, 1st of July 1944, good day to be born, 1st of July, when we found out we got the same birthday, when their father was an intelligence officer at RAF Guys. He subsequently served as short service commission as a RAF Medical Officer, leaving in 1975 to become a GP locally here in Wednesbury. In the 90s, Christopher started to research the RAF stations he had lived at, and this led him to starting the RAF Habbaniya. I've got it. That's Google. Been on Google today. Association. As honorary secretary, archivist, and newsletter editor, he has amassed a huge amount of material and knowledge of the RAF in
Mesopotamia.
There we go. So, ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Christopher Morris.
Can you hear me at the back? Thank you. Well, as it's been said, I was born and raised in the RAF. That's my father, and my twin brother and myself, obviously. And I'm married to Susan, who's here on the front row, and has been absolutely invaluable in supporting me in my researches and activities with the RAF Habbaniya Association. We had 620 members at the peak, and I've learned that somebody here tonight was there as a boy. Well done. So we have the sounds of the desert between our toes. I joined the RAF as an MO and saw a little bit more of the world. RAF Swindeby, recruit training, and then RAF Decimamano in Sardinia. That's me at JHQ Rheindahlem, which is the last outpost of the Victorian British Empire of the early 70s, I can tell you. But why am I giving this particular talk? Sounds of the desert between my toes. This was proudly flown in Iraq for more than 40 years. I call this talk the RAF Garden of Eden. There is a mistake here, by the way, because these are coconut palms, whereas we have date palms in Iraq. But we were in Iraq, the RAF was in Iraq for 21 years before our RAF Habbaniya became the Garden of Eden. So this is a portrayal of Iraq, and on there I've got the main RAF bases that we had. There were many more landing strips and so forth. Mosul up in the north, Shaiba down here, this is the head of the Gulf. Habbaniya, there's Hunaydi, this is Baghdad. It's rather stylized, so the layout's not exactly as you'd expect. But why were we there? Well, it's because of oil. Lamp oil came from Wales, but not sustainable. The Navy ran on wind and then coal, which is very smoky, gives you position away, and it's very tedious. So oil has lots of advantages. Less smoke, you can store it in tanks around, and you can pipe it and refuel it at sea. Winston Churchill, he became First Lord of the Admiralty in 1911. He supported the change from coal to oil. Before then we did have an oil supply, but it came from a long way. It came from Burma. Not exactly convenient. They wanted to find oil closer to home, so experts were sent to the Persian Gulf to assess the potential of oil, and it was discovered in 1908 near Abadan at the head of the Persian Gulf. They kept it secret. There is our oil. One big problem during World War I, the Ottoman Empire. And they're part of the Axis, the wrong side. So our oil supplies looked a bit dodgy. So a big army was sent from India to secure the area at the head of the Gulf. and they secured it, Shibre and Basra, the port, and up as far as Kurna here. This is actually where the Garden of Eden is reputedly situated. Along comes General Townsend, the infamous General Townsend, and he wanted to become the first caliph of Baghdad. He got as far as Ctesiphon, that's just in the circle there, when he overran his supply lines and he had to retreat down to Kut al-Amara, where began the infamous siege of Kut. It took another 10,000 lives twice to relieve Kut, and the Royal Flying Corps were involved. They were in Mespot from 1915, and 30 Squadron, and they were flying messages in and out of Kut al-Amara besieged, and they actually spent from 1915 until 1939 in Iraq, were therefore known as the Palm Tree Squadron. We prevailed over the Ottoman Turks, and General Maud entered Baghdad. He didn't last long, unfortunately, but he still has a bridge named after him. Well, he did until the Iraqis took over. We had the post-World War I mandate for Iraq. A few problems. It's a vast country. It's very tribal. They fight each other. They still do. Kurds, Syrians, Arabs, different persuasions. Huge army. And the locals wanted independence, and they revolted in 1920. And to crush the revolt cost over 400 British soldiers, 40 to 50 million pounds to the Treasury. All in a fierce, terrible climate, in a country rife with disease. It's a big country. This is only the bottom half of it. And from Basra to Baghdad, it's 278 miles as the crow flies. Distance by road, no roads. There are two great rivers, the Euphrates and the Tigris. There are no bridges. It's sand and dust for most of the year, but in the winter when it rains, it's mud. Huge difficulties. So there are two rivers, yes. Only problem is, they become 424 miles by shallow riverboat, prone to grounding and very vulnerable to the enemy firing from each side. And this is what supplied the British during the World War I and during the very early 20s. But we took over control in Iraq, and he appointed Lord Trenchard as Chief of the Air Staff of the Royal Air Force, as we all know. And he proved very successful in suppressing air power, the Mad Mukti and the whirling dervishes in Somaliland. So Churchill and the Treasury were very impressed. So at the 1921 Cairo conference, Trenchard proposed that he can replace the huge army with RAF squadrons supported by RAF armoured cars and the RAF Iraq levies, all under RAF control. So in September 1922, the RAF prepared to take over control of Iraq, as reported in the Times. They marched to Vine Street Station, Uxbridge, and then trained to Southampton. And you notice that the Braemar Castle that took them took out also 2 matrons and the RAF nursing service, 4 sisters and 4 staff nurses. And they were going to take over command from the army on the 1st of October in 1922. And these are the squadrons that went out. And I just point out this at the bottom here. The period of service in the East is 4 years. 2 hot seasons are spent in Iraq, and the remainder of the period, some are slightly cooler, in India or Egypt. It is not possible to allow officers and other ranks to take their wives and families to Iraq. The climate and the disease, etc., was considered totally unsuitable for British women and children. And this was right through to the end, till after World War II, and nobody has yet explained to me why the air officer commanding, the wife and family, children, and the RAF nursing sisters were capable of withstanding the climate. When they built planning RAF Habbaniya, we've read the files at the National Archives, and it was stated that the men would not want their wives and families out in Iraq, and officers, they might provide some married quarters for rent at Habbaniya, but in the absence of a hill station to retreat in the hot summer, it was regarded as a no-go. So there were no married quarters until after the war. They sailed on Braemar Castle, clapped out, and when they got to Basra and Shaiba, they entrained for Baghdad. In wagons labelled 4 horses or 16 men. The officers went by passenger train, naturally. And they had to do their ablutions, etc., by the trackside on the journey up. And they went to Hinadi cantonment, which was where the army were. The RAF were there as well because there was an airfield. Hinadi cantonment, it's still there, by the way. It's Rashid Air Base, or it was. Hinadi cantonment was extensive. This is a plan which we got up from the National Archives. It's on linen, and it's only about this big, and I spent countless hours trying to clean it up. And in 2003 rather, I had a United States Army contact at Habbaniya, and he was subsequently sent back out to Iraq, and he was in the Hinadi area, and he looked at the road layout and some of the remaining buildings, and he said, this was RAF. This was RAF. He knew it was RAF. Hinadi was very large. There's a Victor's Victoria. Victoria's had a tail skid. The more modern Valentia had a tail wheel. It had a huge hospital because of all the disease and the huge army. We inherited that, but when the RAF took over, there weren't the numbers of personnel, and so part of it was used for the new air headquarters. One thing that we did inherit from the army was a pack of foxhounds, the Royal Exeter Hunt and Hounds. And we had them at Habbaniya until 1955. Iraq was unique in the RAF for having RAF mounted police. And when we moved from Hinadi to the new Habbaniya, the RAF police rode their horses 65 miles across the desert to Habbaniya. Let's go back to the main bases, and down the bottom there by the head of the Gulf you can see RAF Shaiba. That was all there was to Shaiba until World War II, and there's only one lady, and she's heard me say this before. Shaiba was regarded in those days as bugger all in the middle of bugger all. And it was a forbidding place. I mean, does it look very inviting? No. And the heat and the climate, it was very humid ahead of the Gulf, not quite as hot, but it was very humid, especially with the marshes in Iraq. And the heat got to them. And when No. 1 Armoured Car Company arrived in 1938, they were welcomed by the mayor and the civic dignitaries. And then up in the north we had RAF Mosul, and I have a map from the National Archives. And this is what it looked like from the air. A company of the armoured cars was stationed there. The main supply base was at RAF Basra, on the Chateau Arab, and these were the RAF's wharves and cranes, and this is actually the memorial to the missing from World War One. And in the 80s or 90s, 80s I think, Saddam Hussein had that huge structure moved lock, stock and barrel out into the desert, miles inland. And some of you who've been to Iraq during the Gulf Wars may have been out there. There's a seaplane base as well. And there is a Supermarine Southampton of 2 or 3 squadron flying over Her Majesty's troopship Dorsetshire. There was Somersetshire, Dorsetshire and Nevassa, all old and decrepit with the poor airmen packed in like sardines. But what were we doing during the 20s and 30s in Iraq? Well, this is the sort of thing they were flying, west of Wapiti, 55 Squadron. This is up in Kurdistan, the mountainous area. And a lot of ground-to-air cooperation. This is Her Majesty's Armoured Car Jaguar. I don't know which was safer, the pilot flying it or the poor armoured car bod lying on the ground. And the armoured cars forayed around the mountains of Kurdistan, and the Kurdish mountains in the north of Iraq are very mountainous and forbidding terrain, as you can see. And this is a World War I Mark Rolls-Royce RAF armoured car. And here's one of their support wagons coming along. It's a lovely hand-tinted photograph. When I started, before I started the association, I put a notice on, what was it? Service pals on Channel 4 teletext. And floods of inquiries came in, and I amassed loads of little black and white photographs from which I made 35mm slides, which I've now digitized, obviously, and later material. So all my material today is thanks to the members and my contacts through the RAF Habbaniya Association. And World War I design Rolls-Royce armoured car. They were still in service in World War II. These actually weren't, when we took over from the Army refused to let the RAF have their armoured cars, so we had to get new ones, but they were still World War I pattern. You notice the charcoal, drinking water, because the water evaporates through the canvas, and as they go along the breeze cools the water down. I had a patient in Wednesbury who was in the TA, who went out for the Gulf Wars, and he complained bitterly that when the water came in on trucks, all these bottles of water, and it was boiling hot. Well, these old desert salts could have told them, you just put a wet sock on it and wave it around and it'll cool it down. And this is what the armoured cars knew. They were self-accounting as independent, forayed it all the way around Iraq. No communications except semaphore to begin with. Camels in the background. And this is an Assyrian chariot. And just a little bit of spoof coming in. I want you to make particular note of these here. ROTB. Repeat after me. ROTB. Okay. Very significant at the end. And I saw this cartoon and I couldn't resist. So what was the RAF's modus operandi during the 20s and 30s? Well, suppressing trouble. It was very much a combination of ground and air operations. They would drop leaflets on dissident tribes and villages. And those leaflets would say, behave or else. And if they didn't, evacuate the village or we will bomb it. We were very kind, and it worked, because we seldom had to wreck their villages. And the RAF armed cars would go around to mop up afterwards. A lot of controversy. There was some seditious correspondence, I think, in the Times about 20 years ago, when that Halabja, when Saddam gassed the Assyrians, Kurds rather, in Halabja, and this reawakened this old controversy. Did the RAF use poison gas, as the Times claimed? Never. It was authorised for use, but it was never used. Iraq is a desert country, a lot of scrub, desert, vast distances, and we were fighting, suppressing dissidents in very forbidding terrain. This is not one of ours, it's one of theirs. Oh dear, 30 Squadron lost it. And then, particularly in the north, there are two tribes in Kurdistan, one run by Sheikh Mahmoud and the other by Sheikh Barzani. And if you look at articles about Iraq, when the coalition went in and since then, you'll find that those names of Mahmoud and Barzani crop up still. So the RAF armoured cars and the aeroplanes would go in and say, stop it, and then the political officer would go in. He's the political officer, and they'd go in, they'd surrender, and they'd be sorted out. Oh, yes, in the Sheikh's waist belt, you could see a kunja, an Iraqi Kurdish kunja, and that is the symbol on the unit badge of Habbaniya on our badges. The Latin motto translated means "We strike the hostiles," not the peaceful, the hostile. And in between, of course, they enjoyed life. Notice they're all wearing their Wolsey helmets or their solar topis. I could have put a slide in of something crashing at Inadi, and as well as their helmets, they're actually wearing thick spine pads, because the heat of the sun was supposedly injurious to the brain and to the spine. Imagine 120 degrees and there's no shade, and you're wearing a thick pith helmet and this thick pad down your spine. Luckily, the medical officers realised eventually. And they could go on forays, all settle down peaceful. As I said, Iraq is horrendously hot, and I'm old-fashioned enough to know Fahrenheit. So this is in July 1945, and it's going to be 116 during the day. The humidity at Hab was low, so it was a dry heat, much more tolerable. It was a different matter in the winter, because in January, one night it went down to 0 at Hab, in Baghdad, and it wasn't unknown for snow to fall, although it wouldn't last the day. So that heat affected the personnel. By the way, the troop ships used to go out in the autumn so that the airmen could get acclimatised over the winter before the heat of the summer. You will notice he's got his knees brown. And the heat affected their minds and their physical ability. And the insect life was horrendous. We actually used to tap our slippers and shoes out in the morning before we put them on, in case a scorpion had crawled in overnight. I kid you not. Is that right?
Correct.
Correct. Oh, There's a scorpion. Wouldn't have fitted in an 11-year-old's shoes. So this is when I come to RAF Habbaniya. It was actually first called RAF Divan, after the nearby mud hut village of Sin El Divan. Hab opened in 1936 as RAF Divan. As I say, it means in Arabic teeth of the fly, which was not considered suitable for the most prestigious RAF base that was ever built. So it was renamed Habbaniya, which I'm informed in Arabic means of the oleander. As you can see, it's 3,287 miles from London and 55 from Baghdad. And this was the original gate sign, and you can see the aerials of #1 transmitting site there, and these are the aerials for the receiver site around AHQ. The distance never changed, never got any closer, but colour came in by the early 50s. Incidentally, those telegraph wires are probably the telegraphs between the UK and India and beyond. So here's RAF Habbaniya. This is a plan from the RAF Museum at Hendon, which Susan and I hand tinted. The airfield didn't have paved runways until World War II. They just had these hardened taxiways. Oil was sprayed on it to harden the taxiways. And what was at Habbaniya? Well, a horse race track, a hospital, air headquarters, air house, Jubilee House, seat for visiting senior officers, sisters' mess, medical officers' mess, air officers' mess, senior civil servants' mess, junior civil servants' mess, station billets, armoured car lines, AMWD, Blunders and Wonders, Air Ministry works upon there, 3 churches, Olympic-sized swimming pool, stadium. These are 2 very large maintenance units, 5 C-type hangars, 4 C-type hangars, etc. Transit camp. These were married quarters that were built. Flying officers' mess. Fuel stores, bomb dumps, and this, ornamental gardens, and this is the civil cantonment, of which my father was the officer commanding. And there's a 7 or 9 mile perimeter fence around the whole base. And in 1955, my father was the officer commanding the civil cantonment, which was the civilian community, the civilian workers and their families, and the families of the RAF Iraq levies. And this is the RAF Iraq levies billets here. And this was our married quarter. We had 5 lawns and 7 servants. Was it 7 lawns and 5 servants? No, 5 lawns and 7 servants, provided by the civil cantonment. And my father was basically the head man of the CC. The original administrator, when Haba opened, was a civilian, but the RAF decided they needed to have an RAF officer because he was accountable, and in fact, one of my father's predecessors, even though he was an RAF officer, all the brassware that he took back to UK was actually gold, undeclared to customs. It was so large it needed a town plan. And you can see a lot of the things on there. We had a cemetery, there was a hospital, sick quarters, SHQ, you name it. There was even a polo ground. It was so large it had a taxi service, and these are all old American taxis. As I said, RAF mounted police, unique in the RAF. I mentioned the fence around the camp. It was 8 feet tall, and it wasn't to keep the rapacious soldiery in, it was to keep the thieving locals out. And they were very thieving locals. And this is Habbaniya from the air. When I say the RAF's Garden of Eden, look at it. It's in the desert, but it was irrigated by water pumped from the Euphrates. I'll point out some features here. That's the Officers' Club pool. This is the Officers' Club, open air dance floor, RAF armoured car lines, station billets, Olympic-sized swimming pool, St Mary's Church up here, St Andrews here, St George's there, maintenance units off here, and the children's school is there, which my fellow sand between the toes of the desert went to at the same time. These are senior officers' married quarters here. The water was pumped into these concrete flumes initially, and then it was distributed through mud channels, and all the areas were irrigated in turn. And as you can see, the lawns had raised flower beds around, and each area would be flooded in turn to a depth of about 6 inches, I seem to remember. And it was allowed to soak in, and the interval of each area being irrigated was calculated to be just less than the life of a mosquito. That is actually, is that Air House, or could be Air House or Jubilee House. It was beautiful. The RAF's Garden of Eden. It was beautiful. Station billets just the other side of that roundabout. St Mary's Cross up by the Catholic Church in front of AHQ. And these are bougainvilleas. Beautiful. Incidentally, and we had ornamental gardens, botanical gardens, with fountains to go for an evening stroll. Marching up, and this is 2004, the same view, the same trees. And these are a special variety of eucalyptus from Australia that were planted in 1934-35 when the road layout was laid out, and they were a special variety, the scent and oil of which discouraged mosquitoes. Discouraged mosquitoes, but unfortunately not sandflies, which cause a lot of sandfly fever. My American soldier friend out there in 2003, I sent him out, emailed him out photographs from the 50s, and he would go to the same spot and recreate the photograph. And you can see that these trees are the same ones that we originally planted. It could rain during the winter, and it would flood the camp. And indeed, in June 1940, when the floodwaters from the snowmelt in the Kurdish mountains reached Habbaniya, it's a very slow course down the Euphrates, and it took until June for the snowmelt to flood Habbaniya, and the camp was flooded, so everybody had to decamp up onto the plateau. This is 1944-48. Andrew Reddy, one of my first contacts, This is a standard billet. If you've been served in the RAF in the olden days, you would recognise the style of beds and the lockers. There was no air conditioning. They slept under mosquito nets, I think, until after the Second World War. And newcomers would be told to pitch their bed out on the lawn, without being told that it was going to be irrigated overnight, and they'd wake up surrounded by water and mud scrapers. And here's a lovely coloured view of the eucalyptus trees rather, and the flooded, irrigated flooded lawn. We're in a naffy shop, which I can remember buying some Christmas toys in the autumn of approaching Christmas in 1955. But particularly, we had a cheap side. These were civilian shops. There was the Empire stores, sold photographic equipment and so forth. And this is John the Baptist. He wasn't Christian, and he was a gold and silversmith. And a lot of the airmen, personnel at Hab, used to buy his silver and gold wares to give to their parents and sweethearts back in the UK. When Hab closed, when the British left, apparently he was found to be in Aden doing the same. Then in 1947, the WAFs arrive. The WAFs arrive. A wonderful photograph of them on parade. Luckily, they did not have to go to the transit camp. They went straight to their billets, which were surrounded by a woven, I'm trying to remember the name of it, but I've forgotten, a woven batting to keep the rapacious airman's eyes from looking at them. But the transit camp, from day one until the day we left, was tented. Except for officers, we actually stayed in our last night at Hab, in that building at the back. Demo happy. The only thing they renewed were the tents every now and again. Outside every billet was a chatty pot. And that lad is not being hygienic. He's the son of a Chico. Each billet had a bearer who used to do their shoes and their laundry and clean the billet, and they used to contribute so much a week to pay him. And if you didn't pay him before you left, if you ever went back through an hour, he'd nab you. The airmen generally used a dimmer to a bit more hygienic. But again, that kept the water cool, no air conditioning. I don't think that billet would have passed inspection, do you? And I think on the CO's inspection, they would have had to take in the laundry as well. This illustrates how they kept cool at Hab. All you had was ceiling fans, and above the veranda was this row of windows, but that helped the air to circulate round and give a little bit of fresh air in 120 degrees. No. 3 churches. It's now a mosque. You're all supposed to, if there were any ladies present, they would go, ah. That's my twin brother and I in singing in St George's Church Choir in 1955. Probably about 115, 120 degrees there. But we did have thinner cassocks. We went to the school, as did my new acquaintance down the front, whose name I've forgotten.
Mike.
He went to the school. We may have left just before my brother and I went there for our final term, or first term of secondary school. Typical children playing. Now you will all remember, if you're of an age, that at break time in the morning you got 1/3 of a pint of milk. Yep. And in the winter because it was thought harmful to drink cold milk, they would put it on the radiators to warm up, wouldn't they? Made it disgusting. We did have cows at Hab. PSI had a cow or two, but their others weren't very big, and we mostly just had evaporated milk. I think the AOC had the fruit of the cow's udders. We didn't. So at break time in the morning, we got a bottle of Pepsi Cola. And when the crates arrived in the morning from Baghdad, half of the bottles were blown because the journey was so bumpy and rocky and it was so hot that they just blew the caps off. But we had Pepsi Cola. Imagine that in 55. You've got all these airmen stuck 3,287 miles away from home in a fiercely hot climate, so you've got to do something to entertain them and keep their minds off other things. Football. I did count up once how many football grounds there were. Tennis. There were 73 tennis courts at Ham. There was a golf course, 9-hole. The greens were oiled sand. This is the Officers' Club swimming pool, which I do remember very well. And Mike will, of course, remember the Airmen's swimming pool, which was Olympic sized. Remember that?
Yeah, my father threw me in there to teach me to swim.
And the water would get so hot, they would actually switch on sprays to cool the water down. No sun hats. Sun cream wasn't invented. I got several skin cancers as a result. And our members could claim, serving members of the association, if they got skin cancer, they could claim for compensation for getting skin cancers in the line of duty. I had to do a lot of work interpreting this, but this is August 57, the sun temperature is 123, in the shade it's 105, and the water is 80 degrees. When there was a polio outbreak, the pool had to be closed. Horse riding, I've mentioned the police horses. Horses, we had stables, riding stables, very popular. They'd ride around the camp and out into the desert beyond. On the Maidan, behind Air Headquarters, which was particularly well irrigated for rugby, and they would hold gymkhanas there as well. And I've mentioned the horse race track with a tote. They're very popular with the Arab sheikhs, who used to bring their Arab stallions to partake in racing, and even though they were good Muslims, they used to bet on the tote. I mentioned the foxhounds, the Royal Exodus Hunt. They used to go out into the desert to chase desert fox and desert jackal and that sort of thing. Habbaniya is the only place that I know of in the RAF where parades were reviewed on horseback. And this is my father's CO at the time, Black Mac, Group Captain MacDonald. He's on horseback. We had a cinema, outdoor for the summer and indoor for the winter. And it wasn't an Astra cinema until the last couple of years of Hab. Before that it was an independent. So they used to get the films on the sort of American circuit, not the Astra circuit. So Hab got a lot of the new releases long before they were seen in the UK or certainly by other RAF Astra cinemas. This is the morning after the night before. Do you think they all had sore heads? No. These are lemonade bottles because in that heat you have to keep hydrated. I can remember having to take salt tablets. Disgusting. And Habbaniya had its own lemonade factory run by these civilians from the CC. This is the indoor theatre and cinema, and naturally the officers sat on the plush chairs in the dress circle, and the airmen sat on the hard chairs at the front. Lots of reviews and plays were put on, and this is 1955, October, and this is the play The Man Who Came to Dinner. That is my mother, who was the wardrobe mistress and the glamour lead, and this is my twin brother and I, who came on at the end singing Silent Night. We took it to Baghdad, actually, to the Al Weir Club, after performing it at Hab. 2 board airmen up on the plateau surveyed a plan of the plateau and the camp, which we have in our possession, and Susan and I coloured it in to make it more obvious. And in 1951-52, to cope with the long range of jet aircraft then coming in, we built a new runway up on the plateau. This was still in operation for the fighters, but this was the long range transport stuff. This is where the boat club was, and this is the ridge of the plateau. The lake was very popular for sailing. There's Bill Verrill's, and in the background that is the yacht club, and this is the old Imperial Airways overnight hotel, because until the outbreak of World War II, Imperial Airways flying boats, C-class, used to stage through, land on Lake Habbaniya. The passengers would stay overnight in the hotel and then proceed on south or the next day. And when the Imperial Airways left, that became an RAF rest and leave centre. You could go on outings to museums, to Baghdad. Some of the delights of Baghdad were unfairly denied to the men. This is old Baghdad. Right, Dowder. I think this is disgraceful, don't you?
Yeah.
But why no admission after 12 midnight? I don't know. I don't know. Being aged only 11, my twin brother and I and my family, we went to the copper souk and we bought a genie lamp. That comes from Baghdad's copper souk. I think they must have been to the brothel. For leave, we had Saramadiya leave camp up in the Kurdish mountains, 6,000 feet up near the Turkish border. First reference I have is when it was opened in 1931, and that season our RAF armoured car friend, his father served in the RAF armoured cars in 31, 32, 33, and John became a member of our association, and we have lots of photographs from his father's travels around Iraq and up to Saramadiya, and even a photograph of them trekking up into the camp the very first season. It was set up every April and dismantled in September. And they would go out on expedition on muleback to the various Assyrian and Kurdish villages, and this is the famous Piri Piri Bridge over the Great Zab near the Turkish border, and this will be swept away every winter, every spring rather, by the melting snows, and then they just build the superstructure back across, and it's still there. So while we're in the mountains, no, it's not the Northwest Frontier or Afghanistan. This is from the Victor Book for Boys, 1974, The Desert Revolt. In April 1942, oh no it wasn't, it was May 1941. And you would think that we were in the Northwest Frontier, wouldn't you? But no, this is Habbaniya in 1941. I'm not going to dwell on the siege and battle because that's a talk all of its own if you'll invite me back for it. Depends how I go tonight. I am the expert on the siege and battle. I've given several talks on it, once with King's Own Royal Regiment subaltern who was there at the time. And this is a Vickers Valentia of the comms flight, evacuating families, not families, well yes, Iraqi civilians who fled from Baghdad at the time of the siege and battle, and flying in relief personnel from the army. And on the 2nd of May, the air striking force, all we had there was a flying training school, 4 FTS, and they took the offensive, and as you can see, there's the plateau, so Habbaniya was strategically at a disadvantage. Lots of army regiments and so forth claim that they relieved Habbaniya. Rubbish. By the time they arrived, Habbaniya had already relieved itself. And I've got a timeline of the various events. The Germans came in, and then the Italians even at the end. So let's say that's a talk all of its own. We were helped by the RAF Iraq levies, particularly the Assyrians who were loyal, and the RAF armoured cars. So anyway, post-war, Ham, as you can see, the plateau, and this is the camp airfield, air traffic, and the 7-mile perimeter fence did not include the airfield, because that was closed off at night by these big rolling gates from the apron to keep the thieving locals out. And there's various planes there which the aeroplane buffs might know what they are, but I was a medical officer, not a pilot. And this is servicing flight in one of the hangars, and no, that's not dust on the negative. These are still bullet holes in the hangar from the siege and battle of 1941. Bullet holes, letting the light in. We had fighter squadrons there, 6th Squadron and 74 Squadron particularly, and this is a cartridge start of the Venoms. This is a Vampire. On the back of the photograph it says, coming in on a wing and a prayer. The bombing range out in the desert, and this is 6th Squadron at the bombing range. I wouldn't like to be in that tent, and I wouldn't like to be lying on the ground marking where the bombs have fallen either. I mentioned the plateau airfield developed for the long-range aircraft, and this is the plateau, and would you believe it, that these Nissen huts were still there in 2003 and 4 when the coalition went in. They were standard Nissen huts, but they were covered in mutty or mud, which insulated against the heat. They did actually might possibly have had some air conditioning in some of those. And this is the plateau dispersal and the crash bay. And we had an approach radar there, as well as the main. And actually the FIR for the whole region was at Habbaniya. And even after the Iraqis took over Hab, nominally in '55, they weren't up to it, so the RAF still ran the air traffic for Iraq. My American soldier friend found the works bricks building, and in it were all the plans and drawings, hundreds and hundreds of them, and he kept sending them to me, rolled up in Humvee aerial tubes. They get through a lot of Humvee aerials, the American Army. And I opened one, and out buzzed a mosquito. Didn't last long. And this is just related to that radar set. These were the drawings for its reorganisation. A lot of aircraft transited through the Plateau airfield. And this is just a shot of the dispersal. I think there's a dove there, isn't there, and a Valletta and whatever. There's an Avro Anson. And civilian aircraft used Habbaniya as well, particularly if Baghdad airfield was closed for any reason. Oh no, that's military actually. But a lot of civilian stuff, as indeed went through here in the 20s and 30s. I have Transport Command Comet, and this is a Valiant en route to Australia for the atom bomb tests and so forth. Aircraft have a habit of crashing, so you need desert rescue. We had a desert rescue service to go out, and they're retrieving a Gold Coast Squadron Tempest 6. I don't think that's a Tempest, is it?
No.
No. Oh, no. That's what the caption says on the album. That was a Hastings pancake. If you need a hospital as well for all these accidents, this is not patching up accident damage. This is actually a chap having his appendix removed. This is Mannock Ward, one of the wards, and this exemplifies the method of keeping cool with ceiling fans and the air circulation around. There was no air conditioning except in the heat stroke ward and the operating theatre and the RAF's dark room. There were shady walkways connecting the various wards and services at the hospital, the departments, just to keep everybody cool as they were wheeled on their stretchers and trolleys between the departments. Princess Mary's Royal Air Force Nursing Sisters in one of these shady walkways. And this is Bill Verrill's wife, who had a baby. And so far as aware, Simon Verrill's was the last baby born at Hab, just before the revolution. Huge maintenance units, did everything. And many years ago we held a reunion here, or the Transit Aircraft Servicing Flight held a reunion here, and that was in that building down the way there on the left, which they used, and I came and sort of showed them slideshows of the Hastings and various things that they used to service. I don't know whether that's a spoof or not. Signals. This is Palm Grove Signals Receiving Centre. Do you know why the radio operator, why his daughter got pregnant? She only did it because her dada did it. And you were not allowed in there unless you were a member on duty in 276 Signals. A lot of the Assyrians worked in our maintenance units and in the Signals, Palm Grove Signals. This is 276 Signals unit. They were not allowed to talk about what they did, but everybody knew. And they used to snoop on the Russian transmissions and radio traffic up in the Balkans and beyond, where they were doing the nuclear tests and rocket firing tests and so forth. And because Hab is on sand, apparently this is very good for bouncing the signals back onto the aerials. They used to either transcribe it, and one of our members from Warsaw, his national service, he was sent to learn Russian, and then went out to 276 Signals and was transcribing Russian conversations and Morse, etc. And some of it will be recorded on ferrograph tape recorders and ferried back to GCHQ. We had a big air headquarters, and again, no air conditioning, not even for the AOC. And you can see how the louvers and the balconies encourage the air circulation. This, by the way, is artillery piece, is World War I vintage. During the siege and battle, it was refurbished, brought back into use, and the Iraqis up on the plateau wondered what the hell was happening when they were being fired on by artillery. Unfortunately, on the 11th of May 1955, we handed over control to the Iraqis. We stayed there, and RAF Habbaniya changed from being RAF Habbaniya to RAF Staging Post Habbaniya. And it took about 9 months before AHQ wound down, and then AHQ became an Iraqi army headquarters. And even the sign, the gate sign out on the road was changed. If you were lucky, you went home in a decent transport plane, Hastings I assume. If you were unlucky, then you went on a Danair chartered York back to UK. Obviously going back in the winter. And this will be your last view of Habbaniya as you circled round. As you can see, there's the plateau runway. Here's the yacht club. This is Habbaniya camp, and this is the camp airfield. This is the Euphrates, and this is the little village of Sin el Divan here, after which it was originally named. Incidentally, Habbaniya was built by Messrs Humphreys of Knightsbridge. And the construction village, to this day, and my father was still responsible for that, is outside the gates, and that was known as Humphreya, after Humphreys. Sadly, there was a revolution, 14th of July 58, and the royal family and loyal Prime Minister were slaughtered, and Habbaniya couldn't operate anymore, so they needed lots of things to do, so they just used to amuse themselves by doing processions and fetes and that sort of thing. But unfortunately, we had to leave, and we had to auction everything off, trying to sell everything off before the locals came in and thieved it. And this is furniture from a married quarter or a billet. I'm lucky to have photographs of the final parade. He's been out there, been a long time, got his knees brown and his shorts have faded. He hasn't been out there long. He's got brown shorts and his knees haven't got there. So the ensign was lowered for the very last time. And Corporal Leach, Alan Leach, member of our association, he handed the ensign over to the Padre, as is customary. That ensign apparently went to some air cadets in the northeast and really and truly belongs with our archives. We've never tracked it down. So Habbaniya was no more. So the final buses arrived at Baghdad Airport on the 31st of May 1959. They had to wear civilian clothes. Nothing was allowed, nothing RAF was allowed, not even British civilian aircraft or Middle Eastern aircraft were allowed to fly in and out of Habbaniya after the revolution. So they had to go in civvies to Baghdad Airport. The Group Captain Stubbs is the last person, the last man out, or so he thought. Actually, at the time of the revolution, Group Captain Huey Edwards, VC, was the CO, and he faced up to the Iraqis whenever there was trouble after the revolution, in his best tropical ceremonial uniform. I don't know why they replaced him, because he really deserved to be there at the end. Why is he wearing a hat in Baghdad at the end of May? So it was reported on the next day, and these came just in time for our final reunion, 2000 and, well, I've forgotten. But he wasn't the very last person, because John Townsend, who was with Palm Grove Signals, I think he was a flight lieutenant or flight officer. He was sent to Baghdad in the March of '59 to act as the evacuation officer. And he had a camera with him, and he wasn't allowed to take any photographs, but he actually took the very final photograph, as you can see, of Group Captain Stubbs. And that was the very end of the RAF in Iraq. And the sun set over Habbaniya. It's still there.
Oh.
Look at those bougainvillea. They still lie buried in our cemetery. Babies, women and children. 289 of them. Our cemetery was beautiful. Sadly, became desecrated, broken headstones, the top lopped off the top of the cross of sacrifice, rubbish strewn. And in 2005, Captain Yetta Cortez, United States Air Force Lady Police Captain, she, despite incoming, set to and tidied it up as best she could. And she performed the first act of remembrance in 47 years. I was able to send out poppy wreaths to her, and these are the bougainvilleas. We did that for 5 years. The very last act of remembrance, appropriately by a United States Air Force chaplain. And that's the last wreath laid. The cemetery was restored in 2019, sadly just gravel beds, not the beautiful planting that we had. We kept Habbaniya alive, the memory of those who died there and served there, by marching at the cenotaph for 13 years. I'll leave you with this view of our RAF Garden of Eden, but not quite leave you yet. This is the RAF's Garden of Eden. Compare it with Shaiba. Climb up the tower for a better view of miles of nothing at all. It was the land of Ali Baba and his 40 thieves. These are the armoured cars dreaming, going home. Subsequent years, something a little bit more modern was hoped. We hoped this would take them home.
Very good.
But you could go overland to Haifa, and naturally, the officers went by saloon with a palm court orchestra. The sergeants didn't do too badly either. The men, of course, unfortunately, went in the cattle trucks. But you could dream of a luxury cruise home in a troop ship. As indeed they did. This is 1928, the MT pool. And remember those words, letters rather, ROTB. They're dreaming of going in the Nevasa home, 1928. And what did Susan's father go from India to Ceylon in 1944? HMT Nevasa. It was decrepit when they went out. Roll on that boat, ROTB. That's what it stands for, roll on that boat. So this is where I take my jacket off. Because Schreiber was so bad at boating, it spawned its own songs, which we keep alive in the Habbaniya Association. This is a 244 squadron version, and it's slightly cleaned up. There might be ladies present. You can join in the chorus. This is 244 squadron, formed at Hab in 1939 and sent to Schreiber. This is their version. Oh, a little bit of heaven fell from out the sky one day, and it settled in the desert on a spot not far away. And when the Air Force saw it, for it looked so bleak and bare, they said, that's what we're looking for, we'll put the squadron there. So they sent out river gunboats, armored cars and SHQ. And they sent a famous 244 into the blinking blue. Each army going to a land that's starry road, until that day you'll hear me sing on that blinking road. But it fairly got my goat. The only words that I know are, roll on that blinking boat, right on the Schreiber I fell and she's gone. So we set our figures, Vincent's bled in fives and Wimpy's two. And we called up all the Oxfords, Knots and Overlanders too. But though we flew the oceans and the deserts so remote, the only thing it taught us was, roll on that blinking boat. I got the Schreiber blues, Schreiber blues, and I fell and she's gone and I blew. So that's a contrast with the Garden of Eden. Thank you.
Ladies and gents, it's my huge privilege this evening to propose the vote of thanks to our...
Can you sing this vote of thanks, Chris?
You want me to sing the vote of thanks? I never got beyond a ukulele, I'm sorry. It's been an absolute privilege to listen to you for many reasons. First of all, I particularly appreciate lectures about which I know absolutely nothing before I come. I had never heard of RAF Habbaniya. Habbaniya, I apologise. I can't even pronounce it properly.
The Arabic pronunciation is Habbaniya. Habbaniya. British airmen couldn't get their tongues round Habbaniya, so to the airmen it was always Habbaniya. The Americans call it Habbaniya.
Where I went wrong. But it has, Chris, been an absolute privilege to listen to you this evening. Not only has this taught us about an area that the vast majority of us, I assume, knew absolutely nothing about, but it's also a deeply personal story, and it's an absolute delight to listen to your experiences whilst there. And I'm very, very pleased that from Wednesfield you've still managed to maintain... Warsaw, I apologise, a little bit further away than Wednesfield. That you still managed to maintain an old members club, a veterans association. Sounds far too old, you know. But it really has been an absolute privilege to listen to you this evening. Thank you very much indeed for your time.
Been a pleasure. Thank you.